Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
And we've got Vance Powell today. You're in for a treat. Woohoo! Before we get started, I want to make sure that you subscribe and hit notifications if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on any of the streaming like iTunes or Spotify, go ahead and subscribe. Vance Powell, how about it?
Hey, man.
He's not a Grammy winner. He's not a one-time Grammy winner, not a two, not a three, but a four-time Grammy.
6.
Well, good. Because your website says 4. Mm-hmm. Wikipedia says 6.
Wikipedia is correct.
Okay, man, you should get on that. Get your people on that.
Well, my website's kind of a joke because my partner set it up for me, and it's actually his part is great, but someone, that's me, has really never put a lot of time and effort into my website. If you actually go to vancepowell.com, that's the website that I kind of roll off of. If you were to go there, it is my name, my phone number, and my email. So,
but that's all you need.
That's all I need. Wikipedia is correct.
It's not great for search engine optimization because they want all those words on the page. But
yeah, but if you search for me, you'll get the Wikipedia.
That's cool.
Well, in the Wikipedia is right then. So 6-time Grammy Award winner, producer, engineer, and mixer. His credits include Fish, Chris Stapleton, a lot of the Jack White projects, The Racketeers being one of them. And I also read I see Jeff and the Brotherhood, one of my favorite cool Nashville bands. Martina McBride, it goes on and on and on. And Kings of Leon, yes? Because I saw that in one spot and didn't see it in another. So, epic Nashville dude. He's got a studio that's super cool called Sputnik. Great
Sputnik
name.
Sound.
Great name for a studio.
Cool. I share it with my partner, Mitch Dane. Him and I are in there together and have been together for a long time. But Sputnik was the original brainchild of a good friend of mine named Steve Mason, who lives right up here, used to live right up here on Arno Road by the bridge, but doesn't anymore. He was a guitar player for Jars of Clay. And when he lived in Countrywood, not Countrywood, where it is, somewhere over in Franklin, he had a house and he had a studio in his basement, and he painted it all purple and green and put up 50 sci-fi posters and called it Sputnik Sound.
Great name for a studio.
And it was there for a couple of years. We made a record there, a Jars of Clay record in 2001, and it was my first Grammy actually. And,
your first Grammy for a Christmas record, right?
It was supposed to be a Christmas record.
Okay.
It was supposed to be a Christmas record and then turned into this record called The 11th Hour.
Charlie lives in our neighborhood.
Charlie lives right, yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
so
right, real close to me.
My pre-divorce life, I lived on the same street. He lived like
Yeah, well, we're neighbors, man.
Yeah, it's so
neighbors.
crazy,
Very
you know.
cool.
So everybody works, and if you're not from Nashville, it used to be 16th, 17th, and 18th, where that's where all the business happened. And there was a couple studios on there, and there still are a couple studios
Most
there.
of the studios.
And then a lot of them moved over to Berry Hill. And is that where Sputnik is?
It is. You know how many studios are in Berry Hill?
How many?
52.
52 studios. And these are like, studios like that you could track full bands in.
How many square miles? It's very small,
It's
right?
1 square mile.
It's amazing.
1 square mile.
That probably blows Google's
I love Berry
analytics
Hill.
Now,
away.
the thing is that there are really only a couple commercial facilities. There's a lot of private facilities. Sputnik is a private facility.
Gotcha.
It's like this. It's for me. It's for my side is for me, and Mitch's side is, for Mitch. We don't, somebody can't just walk in and say,
Right.
I want to book 3 hours.
You don't have like a studio manager.
No.
So let me move this. Can I move this a little closer? Or are you
You can
afraid
move it wherever you want.
I don't want to give you.
So-
I'll move. How about I move?
You and Mitch have separate control
How about
rooms?
that? Yes.
And
Separate
then do you
control
share
rooms,
the
separate-
same live room?
No, separate tracking rooms, separate control rooms,
Oh, no
separate
kidding.
everything, separate lounges, separate everything.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And you have a SSL-E with G?
I have a 1986E with G Plus automation, but it's highly modded by me. I removed, mine's a 6000. So we're going to get a little nerd here.
That's
Is that
great.
Cool?
We love it.
Cool?
We love the nerd.
So the 4000 was a quad bus because they thought quad was going to happen. It didn't. But then a lot of people figured out, oh, hey, the quad bus, I can do this back channel and all this stuff people later. Mine does not have a quad bus. Mine has a stereo bus, but it has 3 of them. It has 3 stereo buses. Now those 3 stereo buses for dialogue, effects, music for video production and film production. And that module that mixes those 3 stereo modules together is called a 688 module. It was made for TV and film. It is not a hi-fi module, in my opinion. And so I cut all that out, and I actually mine has a API style summing board in it with transformers, and then I'm using custom standoffs with quad 8 AM10s with a 28 volt standalone power supply. So it's all nerd.
Let me ask you a question. Okay, so that's the one thing that seems like everybody, when they got these E's, they upgraded the automation to G+, and then they would all put summing amps into the center section. And tell me if I'm wrong. Summing amps would take all the buckets. So you'd have 56 frame or 64 or whatever you have. And it takes all of those and it brings it into the center section, in which it would then be parsed. If it was a 4,000, 6,000, whatever it was going to be parsed into subdivisions then. So do you have the summing amps that are summing from the channels also changed out?
No, so there's no summing amps on the channels. Summing amps, the only summing amps that are on the channels are for the buses. So there's 32 buses on the desk. So the way the desk is made, every module has a summing amp for the bus on it. So 1 through 32, those are the summing amps for that. So that's just for the 32 buses. But the stereo summing in a 4000, it used a pair of LM 347s or something. I don't have one, so I don't actually know. But there were 4 of them, because you had a left, right, and then a rear, left, right, left, rear, right, rear. And then those 4 would fold down into 2 in the after the compressor. And it didn't actually fold down into 2 anywhere, which is kind of an interesting thing. You actually just had to patch them out of the rear or whatever. So, but in the 6000, there was a separate module called a 688, and they used these little hybrid op amps. And those hybrid op amps really don't sound very good. And when they go out, there's no replacement for them. So that module, and it's got a lot of switching. You can, it's you know, again, this is serious nerd talk, but you could dump bus A into B. You could dump A into C. You could dump A into C and B. You could dump C and B and A. And you could do all this, and it had logic to keep you from turning A back into A and all that. And it was all just a bunch of cool stuff that is totally doesn't make any sense now.
And when you say an op amp, are you talking like, when you say it's an API op amp, is that like a
2520?
2520. That's what I was going to ask you.
So that's the style. In other words, that's the pinout. So I tried Hardys, which were great. I tried Jensen's, which were good. They were great too. I just didn't like them so much. I tried, there's a guy named Scott Scott Lieber is another friend of mine who plays bass. Scott Lieber, he makes red dots. He makes this op amp called a red dot. I used his for quite a while. He makes a Melcore, which was before API op amp, and I used that for a while. But Jakir King, my friend Jakir King, gave me a pair of AM10s out of his Coronado, and I had Jeff Steiger, who's a guy here in town who builds kits, Cappy. Custom Audio Products of Indiana, but now he lives in Nashville. He's a great guy. He built me these custom standoffs, so they plug into a 2520, and then the AM10 plugs into that. And then he built the summing board out of it. It's basically a copy out of his API.
Now, I was watching an interview with Pure Mix.
This is all nerd.
No,
Yeah.
It goes right to this point. I was watching a Pure Mix interview where you were answering questions, and I thought it was really cool because you're like, well, no one really taught me. I kind of learned by myself, and
I did.
You were talking about sample packs, not liking the way one man may like a kick drum, it's another man's garbage kick drum. You know, they don't like it, so it's so subjective.
As my mentor Lou Whitney used to say, one man's boy howdy's, the other man's far out. or if we bring it up to this decade, or maybe the last, one man's WTF's, another man's OMG. Yeah. I mean, what I like to hear and another person likes to hear are totally different. I actually like everything that doesn't sound like normal. So if it's
Right.
if it's normal, I don't like it.
Right.
So
You may want transparency in a converter, but you don't want it in a mic pre. You want to have style and vibe.
yeah, actually, I don't even like them in a converter because I use burls. So I like the way that analog sounds. I mean, I would record everything analog and did for years when I worked for Jack White. Everything was analog. I would do analog every day if A, I could buy good tape. I can't. B, record budgets had the budget to record on tape and stay on tape, and the time needed to make all of that happen. They don't have that. Nobody wants to spend $4,000 on tape before the session starts. You know what I mean? Yeah. Nobody wants to do that. And then you can't really buy new good tape. There are some candidates for possible good tape out there.
Consistency is probably the issue.
Consistency has always been the issue since basically, to be honest with you, consistency's been the issue since about 1991.
Well, it always has been, and we'd always just get a batch we'd buy a batch together, right, that we thought we would need so we could align for that batch.
For a good long time, tape was pretty damn good. But what happened was they found that there was a lot of things in the binding, the polyester binding, the thing that bound the magnetic particles to the plastic, basically, like benzene, that were bad. Now, were they bad if you ate the tape? Actually, not at all. There wasn't enough of it. But what happened is, and what a lot of people don't think about, is that for a long time, there was no such thing as digital voice recorders. There was no such thing as digital transcription devices. There was no such thing as digital answering machines. All of them were cassettes or some sort of recording tape. And what they started finding is recording tapes, those tapes, they get bad, people would throw them away. Great, okay, cool. In a town like where we're at right now, if that went into the landfill, it wouldn't matter. But if you went over to New Jersey and you thought about New York City and the amount of transcription and secretarial tape machines and all the things that were being recorded, and then all of those tapes going into a landfill in Jersey, you'd find that tape would break down and leach out. And they just, this was kind of a deal. They knew it. It was going to happen. And the EPA, when the EPA came in, they started saying, there's some stuff here. Now, all this history I'm telling you is my view of it, because I know that my favorite tape disappeared from being sold, Scotch 250, in '91, and the reason is they had to reformulate it, and they went from 250 to 221, was that it? Something like that. I can't remember. And now all that tape is like 456. It's goo. You have to bake it. You have to go through all that, and then they went from there. They went to 996, was a very, very thick, high-level tape, because high-level tapes had started like 900.
Was that Scotch?
That was Scotch 3M. It was 3M at that point.
Okay.
Scotch was 3M.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And we had at the studio I worked at in Missouri, we had a Atari machine that ran 996, and
MX90 probably.
It was MTR 90. Yep. And we had trying to align the mechanicals of it was really hard. And we actually had one of the engineers there, though, that is a good friend of mine. And it wasn't his fault. Did the thing that everybody did. They loaded the tape up and they, put the tape on the reel and they turned it and they hit rewind, and the tape started spinning. The reel started spinning until the reel caught, and when the reel caught, it just bent the swing arms over, because that 996 was so thick that the tape didn't stretch. Wow. It just bent the swing arms straight over.
So back in the day of tape, just so people know, you would get a session and you'd get a batch of tape, and you would go in and you would align the tape machine. And there, soon, once it really progressed, like the Studio 827s, you could do them all together. You could just do all 24 tracks together. But what it really involved was you sitting on a little bucket and you on the front.
I would just sit I'd sit on the floor with with the remote next to me with my screwdriver, because I owned, up until last year, I owned an A800.
And what would it cost? What would it take you to do one channel?
Oh, it doesn't take that long to do.
Let's say like a minute.
Well, the deal is to do it 20. Let's say I really never used mine as a 24 track. You would try to do it always as a 16, but because I had the head for it. But a 16 track alignment would take me an hour.
Yeah. So it was kind of tedious.
The last time I used my 827, I have an 827 now. I used it. I've been renting an 8-track head from Blackbird, 2-inch 8-track. And I used it in, let's see, what is this now? 20, yeah, whatever this year is, 2019. So it was in 18. In the latter part of 18, probably August of 18, I did a band that I produced from France called the Inspector Clouseau. Just guitar and drums band, 2-piece. We did the whole record on the 8-track. And 2-inch 8-track at 15. It was awesome. It was amazing. And then I rented the head for like 4 days while we tracked. And then I took the head back to Blackbird. And then this year, I did a record on the 8-track, another sort of 2-piece band, but it's a 3-piece really. Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band is what they're called. And it was drums, guitar, and washboard, and vocals. And we cut the whole record live. The whole thing is live vocals, the whole deal is live. The only thing, we did a few overdubs here and there with some tambourines and things like that. We did that after the fact. So I went over to Blackbird to rent the tape, the head, and they were like, oh, you were the last person to rent it. I was like, oh, really? Imagine that. I put the head on.
And of course they have it.
Yeah,
it's like
they have it. Yeah,
nowhere else probably.
Yeah,
in the
I
United
put the
States.
head on. I turned the machine, took the head off, my 24-track head on, put the 8 on, powered it up, went to align it, and it was perfect.
That's great. So whenever for those who don't know, like tape came in different sizes. You could have, 2-inch 24, which is kind of where we ended up. And then there was 2-inch 16, which was,
earlier.
So they would just there'd be 24 segmented. Each track would go along, or 16. What you're talking about, I remember in New York,
8.
They had an 8-track head and they were doing an Ozzy record at Room with a View. And it's 8 tracks.
That machine is Jack White's. He has both of those.
Wow.
That was Michael Beinhorn's tape machines. He had 3 of them, and Jack has 2 of them. The third one, which is called Wanda, is here in Franklin at the Yamaha studio.
Now, question for you. I've been rationale.
Those were 2-inch 8. They were custom heads made by John French. They were 2-inch 8-track A800s, and they were originally made as layback machines. And a layback machine is a machine that lays back multi-channel stems for movies and film. So again, back to what I was saying with the 800 or with the SSL, 2 tracks are dialogue, 2 tracks are effects, 2 tracks are music.
So people would think, it's going to be so much fatter, but from a scientific approach, it just means you can hit it with more level, right? You don't get extra frequency out of it.
Well, you do. Part of the deal, part of what's going on here is the smaller you make the head, the smaller you make the track. Let me rephrase, not the head. The smaller you make the track, the less flux you can put on the tape. So yes, you do get the same playback basically, but you get more noise on a 24-track. 2-inch 8-track, I did all the Jack White stuff. We did it at 7.5. Now, I don't think anybody's made a 7.5 record ever. I mean, even back in the day, the Beatles didn't run.
It wasn't on a lot of machines.
Well, it was on a lot of machines but I would take note. Yes, it was on a lot of machines early. And that's because they hadn't come up with the concept of 30. Like
I've got 7.5 Ips on my Studer.
Sure. Yeah.
Which, most of the time when you're buying a modern one, you had 15 and 30. And so people know 15 and 30 just means it's 30 inches go by the head a second versus 15 versus 7.5.
Versus 30. Yeah.
But what the ramifications are is probably the most sonic change is like, you go down to 15, you'll notice the difference in the low end. You go down to 7.5, and you really notice it. And the high end ceiling comes down.
What happens is there's a head bump. There's a bump on the head. Part of the beauty, what a lot of people do not understand, or especially today with the young, I would say the young kids are coming up who sort of romanticize this concept of tape. They think it's all about warmth. It was never about warmth or any of that. Can I say bullshit? Can I say that?
Absolutely.
So it was never about that
say
bullshit.
Say it again.
Never about that bullshit. What it was about was there was a type of medium, the recording medium, that they got really flat enough with good tape. And they got it so that the low frequencies there was enough low frequencies for what the media it was going to go on, vinyl. and there was enough high frequencies for the media it was going to go on. Again, final. That was your main format, right? So over time, they made better tape. They got more level. They got it so that you could go, because again, this is all nerd city, and I can nerd city.
When
all
I'm
day
thinking
long.
about it, I'm realizing how much nuance there is to tape machines.
There is. First of all, the main level for tape machines is 185 nanowebers. That's the standard. So at some point, they started elevating that level. People started going 3 over 185, which is 250 nanowebers. So that was your standard level. Now that's 3 dB louder than you're supposed to. Now, the deal was what they wanted is they wanted 12 dB of headroom before saturation. Saturation is basically distortion. It's a very fun, nice sounding distortion, but it is distortion on analog tape. So 12 dB above that. So they started making tapes with elevated level. So elevated level we went from 185, which is like all the Beatles records, all the 50s records, all those things, all the classic country records, that was all 185. At some point they started elevating the level to get more level on the tape because they started adding tracks. So in mono, a mono 350 tape machine is a 1/4 inch of 1 track. That sounds pretty damn good, to be honest with you. Now they said, let's do. Here's what's funny. People think, they went stereo. No, they didn't go stereo. They went 3-track. Nashville was 3-track, big time. So like all those Patsy Cline records, those were 3-track. Now why 3? Well, they get the band on one, they get the singer on another, and then they do an overdub on 3 of like strings later. And then they take those 3 tracks and then mix them together, right, to mono.
And it would be one of the greatest records you ever heard.
Fantastic. All done live. Everything done live or done as an overdub. Patsy actually.
I have a question. Would they also send it with a bunch of kick samples, like 8 kick samples and about 15 snare samples along with those 3 tracks?
No, there was no sampling. No.
The other benefit, of course, is tape went +3, +6, +9. The other benefit
9,
is that it would push your hiss down, your noise floor.
Well, that was the deal. What they did, they kept adding tracks. So when they added tracks, the track size got smaller. As the track size got smaller, you could only get so much flux per track. So as the tracks got smaller, each track, there was more self-noise. So what they did, they started elevating the level higher and higher and higher. So like in the end, like 456 is actually like a +3 tape.
Yeah.
People drove it harder than that to get that rock and roll thing, which is awesome. It was never one of my favorite tapes, but it's a lot of people's favorite. It's all now goo. It has to be baked. And a lot of it is just...
It falls apart as it ages. That
They call it sticky shed. It comes apart.
It just starts to sag.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing just turns into plastic.
And what maybe folks don't realize is that it would be like, they had a breakthrough in tape technology, and now we can squeeze 3 more decibels on, and then they would throw into the marketplace a new tape format with +6 and +9.
+9, yeah. +9 was where it ended.
Yeah.
996, 900. 409
and then it just
499
and then it just disappeared like everybody that had a Sony Walkman with a cassette in it. It just
the
disappeared,
beginning of it,
and CDs showed up.
It did. The beginning of it was the
the
3324, the first Sony 24-track digital machine. That was the beginning of it. And then at the same time, there were Mitsubishi 32 tracks. These are like
those were great.
We're talking like late 80s, early 90s.
1-inch digital.
Some of them were. The Mitsubishis were. The Sonys were 1/2 inch.
Yeah, 33, 24, and 33.
And 3348, right?
The 3348 was it 1/2 inch?
1/2 inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 1/2 inch. It was a technology. I can definitely tell you that.
Were they all over Nashville?
They were everywhere.
Okay.
Now, I wasn't here.
I wasn't here
but
either.
They were everywhere. They were $250,000. And that was $250,000 with the remote and the cabling, right? When I first went to work at Blackbird, which would have been in 2001, oh, no, that's a lie, 2002, sorry. We bought a couple because there were still a lot of tapes floating around on them. And we had a Japanese client, and that's all they used. So we bought a couple of them. I think that we probably paid $50,000 or something for them. 10 years later, there was a sale on Craigslist, I think, here in Nashville, of a remote meter bridge for 3348, which was very cool because what they would do is they'd put the meter bridge in the control room, and then they'd have the machine in the machine room, so you could see the meters, the 48 tracks of meters. They wanted $300 for the meter bridge with a free 3348 and all the cables. It was $300 to come get it.
That's great.
And the bad part is, it's 700 pounds or 600 or 700 pounds. It's this monster machine.
Did you go get it?
No.
That's the sad part. And, so you can get for me, my favorite machines were the Studer A800 and the A827. And you can get an 827 in working order with a remote that is, maybe it needs a little work, $10,000.
Easy.
$15,000, and these were machines that cost $70,000.
Well, it's actually interesting because the 827 was the cheaper version. The 820 was the expensive one. The 800 really broke the bank. 800 was $65,000 when it came out, but it replaced the 80. And the 80 is this beautiful machine that handles tape beautifully. It's incredibly slow. They were huge. They were hot. They had all kinds. There's all kinds of thermal issues. They kept expanding them. They originally were made in a box. The biggest one you could get was 8 tracks. Then they got a 16, and they jammed 8 modules under the transport, which made the transport not work very well. And then then you had the A80 wide body. And they made them out to 24 tracks. This is a machine that literally will not hardly go through any door in the world. It is massive.
You got to build your studio around it.
And you'd hit fast forward and it'd go. And then you hit stop and it'd go. I mean, it was just like, oh,
it discourages vocalists from punching everything.
Yeah, exactly. and then the other thing is then the 820 came out, and it was an auto-align thing, and that sometimes worked. And then finally they got it really working, but it was about $80,000. And so Studer was losing money because they were selling, Jeep was selling, and I say Jeep, I mean that's the man who owned MCI. He was selling MCI machines for $25,000, $25,000, $25,000, $25,000. Now, those MCI machines sound like God, and they're built by Mattel. And that's my opinion. There are a lot of Molexes that were weird. There was a lot of connectors, but they didn't have any electronics. I mean, they were really, really nice sounding machines. The remote sucked. They didn't punch in great.
They were everywhere in New York City.
But they were everywhere, and they were everywhere here too. They weren't terribly expensive. So Studer said, look, let's take all that auto-align shit out of the tape machine, and let's make all the cool things that we've learned over all the years. Let's call it the 827, and they were $48,000 or $49,000. They were a Studer machine.
But they were perfect. They were great.
They really were. I mean, if you ever got to record on an MX MX24, or no, that's not what they're called, ATR 24. That's probably that or a Stevens. Probably the greatest sounding tape machine ever. But the Ampex was a disaster. Technically, they only built like 40 of them or something. I know Shannon Forrest here in town, he has 2 of them or 3 of them. The Village had a pair, and that's what all those Tom Petty records were made on.
So you still have an 827?
I do.
It doesn't get work.
And I have an ATR 104.
It doesn't get a lot of work.
2 sessions in 2 years.
Okay. And what are you running, Pro Tools?
Yeah.
All right, so here's a question for you, for both of you guys that have way more experience than I do with tape. What are we thinking about the plug-in emulations of these? Do you get the feel out of this?
I started to get there, and then I got off on a technical tangent.
Yeah, sorry.
But no, okay. So nowadays you have all these people who are emulating tape. You can emulate the sound of it. To be honest with you, the UAD A800 is kind of frighteningly good.
So you get the same feeling using it?
Sort of. Now, there's another side of this that I didn't bring up that I've been going on about for years, and that is you can't actually get the sound of tape in a computer because the computer does all its math digitally. There's a concept here. This is, and I'm going to say small g God, not big G God, but small g, and that is that computers, 5 and 5 is always 10. It's always going to be 10. Always 10. Period. There's no two ways about it. Every time it adds 5 and 5 together, it's going to get 10, unless something's broken, right? But in the analog world, the world that we live in, right, small g God world, 5 and 5 isn't always 10. It's sort of 10. Right. It looks like 10. Sounds like 10.
Might be 10 on the left side and
it might be.
Not 10 on the
right. It might be. And to quote George Massenburg, once you go analog, all bets are off. Now, here's the thing. If you were to record on your B67 there, right? That's what that is, right? B67. If you were to make a master, so okay, we're gonna put the tape up and use it as a tape master, and you hit play and record, and then you play the track back, right? You record onto the tape. Then when you're done, you rewind it, right? And then we're gonna dump it back into Pro Tools. You dump it back in Pro Tools. It'll be longer or shorter. Now, does that mean it's broken? No. It just means that's how it works. It'll be a little longer or a little shorter. The longer the song, it'll be more long or more short. They'll never play back at exactly 30 inches per second. Now, I propose that is the thing we love about tape.
That totally makes sense to me.
And it's the same thing we love about vinyl. In other words, the guy who cut the record cut it at 33 and a third. Okay, cool. Yeah, it probably was exactly 33 and a third-ish. And then when you play it back, it's exactly 33 and a third-ish. It's and as the grooves move in, the grooves speed up. Because it's a concentric circle, it speeds up. So it speeds up on a scale that's exactly linear-ish. So none of those things are true. There is the math doesn't work right. So the only way to get the sound of tape in Pro Tools is to cut it on tape first and then transfer it wild into Pro Tools. And what I mean by wild is no synchronization, no locking, no any of that. Because what the synchronizer does is it basically says we have 1 minute of music or 1 hour of whatever. Let's say 3 minutes and 9 seconds of music. That's what you recorded. We're going to record it into the computer exactly at 3 minutes and 9 seconds. Now, it'll wiggle a little bit through the track, but it won't float. And when I say it's going to float, it may be 3 minutes and 10 seconds. 3 minutes and 8 seconds. You know what I'm saying? If you get real hardcore about it. But that movement, that mechanical movement is an analog, again, a small g God thing that the math in Pro Tools, the digital part of it can't ever understand. The only way to do that is to put some sort of universal wow and flutter that it would be random. But again, we're back to computers. Computers can't do random. There's no way to randomize a number in a computer. The only way to do it is to do large factors, is to start factoring, 5,000 digit numbers and then figure out that and seed a random generator, which means that maybe that random number will come up again in 4,000 years. But that's still quasi-random. That's not really random. But the analog machine is nothing but random. Everything is random about it. Every channel, you can't align every channel perfectly. Every card has
My machine sounds different when I turn it on the next day.
Well, you're not supposed to do that.
Well, I don't,
just leave it on.
I've got like a brownish power out here. So, I don't have a really consistent.
Well, that was in New York City, one of the guys that kind of helped me along was Neil Dorfson. And
nice name drop.
He hated tape because every
So
day,
did George.
Every day he would turn it on, it would sound different to him.
Massenburg.
He had such golden ears. He could
not
hear
to
it.
mention, you make a record and you come back and you work on that record over 6 months. You're going to be losing high end over that 6 months.
Crazy.
It's going to be brighter on day one than it was 6 months later.
Well, the big thing is all those guys, I'm gonna defend all of them, and then I'm also gonna throw them under the bus. All those guys know that what they did was they cut the drums, they cut the rhythm track, they made a slave reel, and they worked off the slave reel. They all did that. That's how you did it. I mean, you know, Rumors is the famous one where they could see through the tape and all, and you know they didn't. There was no synchronization, so they had to put their finger on it to get the tracks, the two tape machines to run together at the same time and all that. You know, that was Mick Fleetwood's job to put his finger on to keep the drums with the rest of the band. You know, after a while, these long records, people were like, okay, hold it, we got to figure out a way to do this. Simty came along, they figured out how to synchronize them together. They'd make a slave reel, they'd just make a copy. And they would be working off that copy, knowing full well at some point that like the vocals are on this reel, the band is on this reel, overdubs are on the, you know, reel A is the band, the tracking, and the correct edited performance, and then B is all the vocals and overdubs, and then they would put the two machines together and they'd lock them together. And they've been doing that since the late 70s. So. But it's a fact. George used to have this thing where he was like, I hated the fact that I would have everything I wanted sounding perfect. We'd cut the track, I'd play it back, and it would be different. And he goes, when digital came out, at least it was closer. You know, and like you said, once you go analog, all bets are off. I love George, and I worked with him for a long time at Blackbird, you know, building Studio C there when I was the chief there, and you know, and he's full of a lot of great opinions, and he's also all these dichotomies, you know, like he hates mixers and consoles and all. But then you go, okay, cool. So you work in the box, fantastic. What was the last hit record you mixed? What was that you recorded? What was it done on? Well, it was done on 3348, you know, and mixed on an Eve console. Okay, cool. You know, it's like, or mixed on an.
But is George mixing that many records right now?
Well, does he? I mean,
you won't deny that there's great records being made in the digital world.
There's a lot of good ones.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what you were saying with that.
What I was saying is that for somebody to be going on and on about propensing this media, he hasn't had any real success in said media. Mixing in the box. Now, that's not meaning that people haven't. People obviously are having it. But there's a tough one. There's a lot of guys who are making really beautiful sounding records that are mixing in the box, and there's a lot of them. There's an equal number of them that aren't.
Yeah, like Frank Filippetti comes to mind, not necessarily in the box, but digitally. You know, that Hourglass record. I was just talking about it last night with someone. He was telling me before that record was released, he told me, I just recorded this James Taylor record. It might be the best thing I've ever done. I did it on two 02Rs, which are known for how shitty the mic pre's are. Mm-hmm. He said, I recorded it on two 02Rs, and then I mixed it on the Capricorn at Right Track, and he said, it might be the best thing. When it came out, it was so good that I was I was brought to tears over one of the songs, listening, and I was at Ted Jensen's place, this is when I was in New York, and he had just played me the surround thing, and it was just so emotional.
Can I propose something to you?
Mm-hmm.
It's the talent.
100%.
That's it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not the engineering.
It's like, hey, here's a set of paintbrushes. Do your thing. And I think guys like Frank and maybe George Massenburg, maybe those guys are more bent towards like, hey, I want consistency. I want to know it's right where I left it.
That's what George wanted. George wanted whatever he recorded to be what plays back.
Yeah.
And
you won't ever
to be honest
that.
with you, George did a bunch of beautiful work at Blackbird that nobody noticed because people make records these days that nobody noticed, you know what I mean? I mean, it happens. I've made hundreds of them that nobody noticed. But the deal is like that's exactly the thing. I can tell you that I have records that I love the sound of that no one's heard of because they've just it's a nobody artist that happen to have their shit together. But the reality is really great artists a monkey could record. You know, I did a session yesterday with Chris Stapleton, who I've done a lot of work with. Absolutely, positively, one of my favorite vocalists I've ever. I mean, he's just his range, his power, his emotion, all of that. But when we go in to make his records, you know, a lot of people don't know this. All of the records I've done with Chris are live. That's him playing the song with the band and singing it live.
Wow.
Traveler has one song that he didn't like. He played electric on, that he didn't like his vocal, and we overdubbed it. But for him to, he's a guy who has to play guitar when he sings, so we had to hook up the guitar and kind of like have him play along, There's one song on From A Room Volume 1, I think it is. There's not a single song on it that's not 100% live.
Wow.
Now, did we do overdubs? Sure, we played, there was Shaker, there was solo, there were overdubs. But the whole record was played and sang live. The B one, same thing. The new one that's will come out here in November, exactly the same thing. Wow. 100% live except for one song.
I've learned to love that. When I was younger, my anxiety level would go through the roof when somebody wanted to play acoustic guitar and sing the lead vocal.
Well, because you were going for that perfection thing.
Well, it was just like, hey, this is not optimal, right? But when is music optimal, right? But I've always found
that it's real.
When you bring up the faders, I'm blown away that it isn't as much of an issue as I thought it was going to be. If you do a little bit of thought, like choose the right microphone and try to find the best sort of setup so that it can happen, and then you bring up those faders, that's the last time you think about it, is whenever you're miking up the guy. Mm-hmm. And it always benefits the record if that's what the artist needs.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, what you have to do is you have to kind of like, as an engineer, we all strive for some vision of perfection. And I think all engineers we suffer from, imposter anxiety, We all think that, our friends are going to hate everything we do and we're a joke and they laugh about us when we leave. And I'm sure my friends do, so there you go. But when you're dealing with the artist, your job is to capture the best you can with the environment and with the whatever things that are there. You just have to deal with it. So there's a song on Traveler called Whiskey and You that is one microphone.
Wow.
It's one microphone. Now it's an acoustic guitar vocal performance. It's one microphone. It is one take minus one word from the second take. We just cut the whole. Okay, it's one track. I say it's one track. It's actually one track, 2 room mics, and a chamber mics. So there were like 5 tracks, but it's just one music track.
Where did you record that record?
Well, the whole record minus 3 songs were done at RCA Studio A.
And then Cobb's place?
Well, it wasn't then, but yeah, it is.
It was Ben Folds at that point.
It was Ben's place at that point. We did 2 songs at the Castle, which we actually talked about earlier. We did a song called Daddy Doesn't Pray Anymore, which was really heavy, super heavy, emotional song because Chris had lost his dad a year or so before. And that was cut with the drums, acoustic guitar, bass, and drums in the room. All in one room.
Would you tell the story that you were telling earlier, which was you recorded it outside? You saw a pass-through that I have to record outside. Tell us that
then what ended up happening was we cut that song. It was super heavy. So then Chris was like, let's do something fun. And he had this song called Might As Well Get Stoned. So we were trying to – Dave was sort of walking around with his guitar at the Castle, and he was just wanting something different. And so the Castle is for those who don't know, is a studio outside of Nashville. It's on Old Hickory. It's on Old Hickory, and I think that's what that is. I think
the new originals.
Yeah, exactly.
Old Hillsboro. Right?
Old Hillsboro. Yeah, it's on Old Hillsboro.
That's right.
Old Hillsboro, and down the street from Barbara's, which is awesome. Mean 3, it's great, but it was right around dusk, and Chris, we'd opened the front door, and Dave went out there, and he's like, let's record it out here. And so I set up acoustic mic out on the porch, and we set up Chris's vocal mic, and then Chris played electric. So then we were like, well, let's just do stupid. Let's make this stupid. Let's put Chris's amp in the alley behind the studio. And then let's run like 5 20-foot cables and run the room mic way up in the forest up behind.
Oh, wow.
Behind the studio. And then in the front, let's do 5 20-footers and let's run it way down by the street out front. And then we put the kick drum in the hole of the door. So those guys, it was kind of funny. They had to go around to get on the porch, which is pretty dumb, but it worked. And I put a 44 on the kick drum, and then they had a Altec Coke bottle, which is kind of the old school Nashville, like that's how all the Quonset Hut records were made. A 44 out in front of the drums, and then a Coke bottle over the top, this Altec Omni Coke bottle. I put that over the top of the drums. We put the bass amp in the room with the drums, which was the tracking room, but the bass player stood on the porch with those guys. And we cut this song. And if you listen to the record, you can hear cars going by on the road, and you hear bird chirping and birds and crickets and all that.
I literally am dying to listen to this.
I'm going to go listen to it after.
And this is where you segue in the podcast to play just the intro.
Yeah.
And basically we cut it. We cut 2 takes of it, and that was the take. And the second one was the one. Wow. And that was it.
That's awesome.
That was the whole track. That was the whole track. I think maybe Robbie Turner played steel on it. I can't remember right now. He played it as an overdub later.
Did you mix those records as
I did.
well? And so are you doing that at Sputnik, or are you doing it at
No,
RCA?
that record was mixed at Blackbird.
Okay.
Traveler was mixed at Blackbird in Studio A on the Neve. From A Room Volume 1 and 2 were mixed at RCA Studio B. And the new record was mixed at RCA Studio B.
Are you using any plugins, or is this all outboard, all console, all...
Well, I'm
somebody like Chris.
I'll use plugins. I don't care.
You say RCA Studio B. That's
not BA.
Okay. Yeah.
A, sorry.
'Cause I didn't know they were doing
I
that.
said that totally wrong. A. Yeah, RCA Studio A, which is now called Low Country Sound. It's Dave Cobb. He's rented it in perpetuity.
What was in there when Ben had it? Was it an API?
Oh, it's a beautiful API, which Dave still has. Now he's replaced it, but it was a 1976 API.
Legacy?
It was not a legacy. It was a discrete. So it was a split. It had a jukebox
Like
and
something
Yeah.
40, 60, whatever they call them.
Yeah, whatever. It was 32 inputs, 16 outputs. No, 12 outputs. Yeah, it was one of those. Do you guys remember the weird 12 channel tape machines? That's what Hendrix had.
No.
Yeah, Scully had 12 tracks. But that didn't last very long. But yeah, it was 12 buses. So hold on a second here.
Now, would you have rather mixed that in your room because
Yes.
you know it better?
Yes.
Okay, and so
But
why,
that's purely.
you think you'll get maybe a little more consideration to mix the next one in your room because
I
you
don't
feel
know.
like you have a better outcome?
No, it's all about what makes everybody comfortable. This might be controversial. I love mixing in my room, but that doesn't mean everybody else does. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if you're in somebody's home, they want to be at home. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. By the same token, if I'm producing a record myself, I'm not going to go to Blackbird and mix it. That doesn't make any sense because I know my home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you.
So.
But logistically, for like assistants coming in or messengers and all that.
I will say this: the big thing for me is the Studio A sounds amazing. The control room was made for 3-track originally. That's what it was set up for. It had 3 softened Altec, probably 613s or something, in the ceiling. And then it has 40 feet of glass. So you have this huge glass panel going out into the room. It's hard to mix because the low frequencies are nodal all over the place. Now, I got around it by just figuring it out, by putting my speakers on the speaker bridge, taking them off the speaker bridge.
Did you reference a bunch of stuff?
Yeah, I just referenced stuff that I did. And then the other thing is we mixed, not Traveler, that was done at Blackbird. And there's a side note here, and that is that the day we played Traveler for the record label, I rough mixed the whole record, which was 15 songs. Now there was only 13 on the record.
You're going to tell us some of those made the record, right?
6 of them. Now, part of the reason for that was...
That's incredible.
Part of the reason for that was we had it really dialed in. I had the rough mix dialed in.
Where'd you do the rough mix?
At RCA Studio A. Yeah, for Traveler. So there are several songs on there. That Daddy Doesn't Pray Anymore is one of them. There's a song called More of You. That's one of them. I believe Devil Called Music is one of them. Now, what happened? I played it back. I put up it on the faders, and I added a little EQ here and there, and I just rode the faders live, and it was done. I did 15 songs between 1 and 5. Right?
1 to 5 p.m.?
That's like Billy Decker speed.
It's even shorter.
I don't really know Billy. So, but I guess if you have a good template, that works. But, I don't really work that way. But, yeah.
Well, here's something. So if you're talking about Studio A and you say it's the Neve Room, that's the 8078.
In it, yeah.
Okay. That came from River Sound. That was Fagan's console that I had actually recorded on when it was in New York City.
But it's nothing like that now. It's
I
been
bet
so
you he
highly
tore it
modded.
apart and-
It's been so highly modded. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have any idea that thing was going to do what it did?
Yes.
You did?
Let me tell you how I knew.
Okay.
Here's how I knew. First of all, I don't do a lot of Nashville stuff. I really don't do country music. I don't do it at all.
Right.
Because there isn't any really country music going on right now, to be honest with you, except for what I'd call alt country. There's a bunch of great alt country artists that, Music Row doesn't give a shit about. Sturgill, Margot Price. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Coulter Wall, there's all these. Jesse Dayton. I mean, there's all kinds of people I really love that are doing what I would call country music. But basically what's coming out of Nashville now is just a bunch of pop music with a twang. So there you go. I'm going to blow my Music Row cred. But the great thing about Chris and the people around Chris and Chris's A&R, Brian, is that they came over and they listened and they realized this is something that is so different. It's going to bomb or blow up. Let's bet on blow up. So we had this rough mix day because we had a party to play it for the label. Now, those of you, I know Joe knows this quite well, who's ever been to a listening party in Nashville. Listening party is where, and this is my jaded Nashville view, because I've seen a few of them. That's
the only view I have.
Listening party is where all the people from the label come over to get free drinks, basically happy hour, get free drinks, talk about all the shit they hate at work, listen to a record in the background, and then they go home half drunk to their spouses. And hopefully they get laid. But I'm just kidding. But and that's kind of how it kind of works. It's a preview of work they've got coming up later. People don't get invested in it. I don't think they do. Not really. The people who are invested are the people whose butts are on the line. You know what I mean? And they're great with it. But the rest of them, that's 6 months from now. So 6 months from now when the record comes out. So we had 15 songs with Traveler. We only played back 14. One of them we threw out before this was all done. Chris never liked we kept trying to get this audience like a stadium vocal. We just kept putting voices on it and it just kept sounding stupider. So we forgot it. We blew it off. And it was a good song, but we just blew it off. It didn't fit the record. I'm glad it's not on it. Sorry, Chris. But it's not on there, so it doesn't matter. We played it back, and at one point in the record, I saw a record dude that I don't know and two women sobbing.
Wow.
And the record ended. People stopped, and people didn't talk. They listened. They talked a little bit. A lot of hushed listening. Between songs, people, and then the next song would start. When that song, Daddy Doesn't Pray Anymore, there were people openly weeping. And then the record ended, and people clapped. And one of the girls from Mercury said, "Can we hear it again?" And we played it again. And almost all of them stayed. That was the first time I knew. I knew it when we were recording it, that something special was happening because I saw it. I saw it happen. It was amazing. But the real day I knew it was the first week it came out. It came out on a Tuesday, Cinco de Mayo, by the way. And then Chris had a show at the Cannery Ballroom on Friday and Saturday night. On Friday night, I went. I can't remember who opened because we missed it. I went with my assistant and my wife and a couple other friends and ran into another engineer friend of mine. And we got there 10 minutes before Chris went on. Now, those of us who have been in the Cannery Ballroom, it's this weird L-shaped room, and you come in the back, and it's L-shaped. There's a bar on the one side. So we went to the bar and got a drink and came back. But we're way back by the entry door, really, at this point. They started with the song Traveler, and when Chris sang the first line, the guy next to me sang it with him. And then the guy behind me was singing Traveler. This record's been out 4 days in Nashville. Nashville doesn't give a shit about people.
No.
They don't care. People, like me, they stand there with their arms crossed, looking, going, impress me. And these people are singing this song. They have listened to this song. Traveler wasn't on the radio. It wasn't a hit. And I thought, holy cow, this might, do something. And I don't know all the real numbers, but I have an idea that it had sold about 70,000 records because it had got a lot of critical praise before the CMA performance. I was told it sold 70,000 records overnight after the CMAs. And I think now it's probably well over 5.5 million records or 6.
Yeah, it was just
5.5 million records.
Crushing the charts.
It sold
for years.
In 1 year. Chris sold more records himself than every artist in Nashville combined.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I remember it was like the second biggest record of the next year behind him.
Okay, so
it was
here's my question. This is always a Nashville dilemma for me. Is how are people not lining up to make more of these kind of...
Well, they are. But see, the thing is, Nashville...
I know he's special. I get it.
He's super special.
Yeah.
And him and his wife, Morgan, I want to say what's the right word? I want to say categorically the best people I have ever worked for in my life.
That's awesome.
They're the only people who have actually seen if I was a little upset about something or something was happening, that they would say, hey man, are you okay? Is everything all right? Can we do anything for you? Is there anything we can do to help you? I mean, they are those people. Yeah, and I fucking love them for that. Yeah. So, but Nashville loves copying. And there's all kinds of bearded Chris Stapleton wannabes out there. Some of them are making hit records, some of them whatever, and some of them are they're just playing the same game. Nashville loves that.
I think the better question is why aren't labels scouring to put out more of those? Because it goes back to that Bruce Springsteen conversation we just had in the last podcast, right? It's like to find a Carole King, to find the special diamond.
I think it's because there aren't real record people anymore.
Right.
I think they're not people. I mean, I think that, well, I don't know. I mean, look, I only know the rock world a little bit. Everyone in the rock world, in the A&R world, it seems like, has worked at every label because they've all been fired and then got a gig. You get fired from this gig and you go to Interscope, and then you get fired from Interscope and you go to, whatever, you go to Warner, and then from there you end up at Concord. I mean, I'm just
yeah, and they can't find it either. So it's like, what you would think they'd go out and look for it, and maybe they just say, hey, he's a fluke. We're going to get back to our system where we are in control of what we put out, same stuff.
Well, that's the deal. That is the thing. That's what they want. They want that. They want to be able to put somebody out. They want another Randy Travis. They want a good-looking guy who sings songs that make women cry and want to go dance, and guys go, yeah, that guy's cool, man. I'll play his record in my truck. Right. Now, that's a stereotype. There are. I mean, I just came from out west, man. Let me tell you, that's their crowd. But here in Nashville, I mean, whether you like them or not, Georgia Florida Line are a huge deal. Whether you like what they do or not, I don't care. It doesn't matter. They're a big fucking deal. They're not a country act, period. They're not, period. They're a pop act. It's 100% a pop act. You know, so that's my opinion. 100% my opinion. You know, I mean, I just worked. We just did a track with Joey yesterday with Chris. We sang on a thing, and it was a great track. It was a country song. It wasn't Florida Georgia Line. It was another artist. It was great. I'm not downing it or whatever. I'm just saying that's not country music. It's not country music. But what, you know, so neither was Countrypolitan. Neither was Walking After Midnight.
Right.
That wasn't Cold Cold Heart. So there's some flex in there. That was you know, Nashville pushing into pop music, you know, pushing into Bobby Darin, pushing into all these other, you know, pushing Patsy Cline. Patsy Cline fucking hated it. She hated all that shit. Because you got to remember, and just a year before, Patsy Cline was singing Kitty Wells songs in Western dresses and boots. So she hated all that shit until the money came in. And then she realized, I can be this country crooner. I can be this. I can do this because I can do it. You know, Loretta Lynn never became anybody but Loretta Lynn. I worked for Tammy Wynette. You guys might know this. I worked for her for 5 years. Tammy Wynette was the greatest fucking singer I ever recorded until I recorded Chris. And I didn't record her so much. I mixed her live. She would blow your fucking head off. Mm. She was so loud and had so much power until she didn't. You know? I mean, I toured with her and Jones. Jones, the greatest country singer ever. He's an asshole. He was an asshole, and everybody knows he's an asshole, but he was the greatest country singer ever. That kind of artist is really hard today in country music.
I wonder if, like, the George Jones's era, if they had morphed from another thing that original version was saying, oh, that George Jones isn't country.
Well, think about the fact George's first hit is, you know, I think it was Race Is On or White Lightning compared to He Stopped Loving Her Today. That's a big morph. Yeah. You know what I mean? So yes, it did change and it did go different routes. You know, who's going to wear them shoes and Rockin' Chair and all that. I mean, Rockin' Chair was probably closer to White Lightning than any of that. But still the thing is that song was so fucking country. You know what I mean? I mean, it is as fucking country as it gets. Pardon me, all my fucking, but it's as fucking country as it gets. And He Stopped Loving Her Today is probably one of the greatest country songs sang by the greatest country singer ever.
Hey, I wanted to go back to something. We got off on a tangent, but I had a question for you. So you mixed Traveler in Studio A with an 8078.
In Studio A, Blackbird.
You've got an SSL 6000. Mm-hmm. So, like, the difference is, like, I've got a Harley Davidson here. Yes. Versus one of those sort of crotch rockets that are 10,000 RPMs. Those consoles are that different from one another. So like you ride them differently.
What I would say is because by comparing your Harley to a crotch rocket, you're giving the SSL some disservice. The Neve is a sound, as is an API, as is the SSL. I would say more hit records have been recorded on or mixed on an SSL.
I'm just trying to show the disparity.
So cool. Yeah, they are radically different. What we did was we recorded on an API and mixed it on the SSL. Or no, that was wrong. We recorded on the API and mixed it on the Neve to sort of try to bring that classic feel. Dave wanted to go to mix it at Blackbird because they had all this gear that we could try out and mess around and nerd out on. And it's a super nice studio. Studio A is super nice, you know, to be in and hang out. And it sounds great in there. And the control room's big. And, you know, like on the last night, we had this really great rap party, you know, that went till way late with lots of wine. And you know, it was great.
My question for you is, like, how do you approach mixes, 8078 mixes versus SSL? Because it's a different beast.
It's different, but not under my fingers. It always comes out sounding like me.
Do you think you could have mixed Traveler on the SSL and it would sound the same as the 8078? Mixes? I think it would be different. Yeah. I think it would be different. The big difference would be one room I know relatively well, and one room I know it like my socks. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The big thing for me is I've done everything in my power to make the SSL more powerful. Now, if you have ever seen a picture of my wall of gear, I have a lot of gear. I have a lot of outboard gear. I use the SSL as a big summing mixer. I do use the faders, I do use the automation, and I 100% use the recall. That's why I have an SSL, because I don't like mixing in the little knobs and squares and in the mouse. I don't like it. People talk about their template. Okay, I've got this template I build, and I put all my mixes into my template. Well, you know what my template is? My template is my desk. I have certain channels on my desk that are always the kick. Certain channels are always the snare. Certain channels are always the guitars. There are inserts into those that are certain things that I know are always going to sound good on guitars. My vocals channel is always the same. It always has the same. It has Varimu and has Massive Passive and has, or has RS-124. It has something in it that I know I'm going to like.
You're like routing these signals to go through these channels.
And I can put up every song. I can put up songs one right after the other. If I've recorded them, you can put them up on my desk, put all the faders at 0, hit play, and that's a rough mix.
Yeah.
Every time. Now, records that I'm mixing, I have a fantastic assistant, Michael Fahey, and what he does, we have a B room, and I have the exact same Burl converters in the B room and a summing mixer up there, and it's wired exactly like my desk. So he sets a mix up there. He does a balance on the faders of Pro Tools, or we do a clip gain, depending. Sometimes things come in, they're so fucked level-wise. I mean, everything is recorded all the way to 0, and it's like, okay, minus 12 on every track. This happens all the time. And then that way...
So you'll gain down, you go through all the tracks and gain down to minus 12?
And try to get the faders so they're at least within 3 to 5 dB of 0. And then he'll do a little balance, just a rough balance in the summing mixer. And that way, when we put it up on my desk, I put my faders up, I hit play. I can hear everything. Right off the bat, I can hear everything. And then I can go, okay, cool. Let me put the kick insert in. Okay, cool. Well, that makes it better, or that makes it worse sometimes. Or let me do this. Let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. Boom, 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 boom. And within 25 minutes, I have the mix together. Within an hour,
he's not prepping it with any EQ or compression.
No,
it's just all level.
Nope, all levels. Then within an hour or so of me putting plugins on things or whatever, I'm starting to get into the creative side of it. Okay, cool, I've got this balance. And then, 3 hours later, 2 hours later or so, I've written all the automation and all, and I'm ready to turn it in, to send it to people. I can usually mix almost every song in about 4 hours.
How do you know when it's done?
I know when it's done when I fuck it up. So, like, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, man, I really wish I did this vocal throw here. Let me do that. And then I do it, and I go, oh, no, that was stupid. Fuck it, back up, And, Pro Tools, I have my Pro Tools saving every minute, so I just go back. If I've done it in the box, I just go back, open something back up.
That's the real expert level stuff. It's like knowing when you've gone too far, because it takes you years to know that you've gone too far.
To be honest with you, I probably undermix most things before I send it to the artist. I don't try to over mix. Like, I don't try to, reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. I try to make it sound good
that's confidence, man. I'm the opposite. I'm at that stage. Like, mixing is kind of a new world for me. I've always been a writer producer, and I'm noticing, because I lack the confidence in the art form right now, that I'm going so far past where I should go.
Well, I think that what happens is we have to sort of have a balance, a work-life balance. If I have a management company in LA, GPS, and we've sort of come up with a fee structure for me that is very day-based. I will mix a song by song rate, but I probably do 30%. Let's say 20% like that. Because what I'll do is I'll say, look, it's this much a day. I'm going to work from 10 to 7. All right? And if you're available, I'm going to probably get you 2 songs, unless it's really complicated. Now, I just mixed a record the other day at 180 tracks. And it's like, those take a day.
It's a lot to sort through. Yeah.
It's a lot to sort through, But once I got it, every song had the same layout. Mm-hmm. So then it was like, oh, okay, now I can go from, the first song took a day. and the band loved it. And then the next day I did 2. And
Do you
then
do the
next
import
day I did
session
2.
data into?
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we'll set up like a mix template from the first song.
Gotcha.
And I'm a big fan of serendipitous mixing. I love that concept. So we'll try our best to start the track. We'll sometimes this screws us, by the way. I'll move the track so that it's like at an hour. So I'm an old time, I have time code on the SSL, so we'll start at an hour. So we'll actually we'll open the next session, lay it out on the desk. I'll leave the automation on and just play it and see what happens. Because there may be something that happens, some effect that's on a guitar that now is a keyboard, that now is totally this crazy cool sound. And you're like, okay, cool. We're going to keep that.
That's really cool.
But this is a thing. See, there's a lot of things that a lot of people, the youngsters in this business don't get. And that is the tape-based production. You had a comp reel, usually. And that comp reel had all the masters on it. Okay? So let's say it was a 24-track tape. Okay, cool. So usually if the engineer was smart and knew what they were doing, the guitars were always on 15 and 16 or 17, 18 or whatever. The vocals were always on 20, 21, 22, whatever. Tambourine was on 23. Timecode was 24. That kind of stupid thing. Or shaker was, something that was not needed so much was on 23. Sometimes people put the bass, which would work fine if you put timecode on after it, but not if you did it before. But it worked fine if you put the bass there and then put timecode over it on 24. But you didn't want the 2 to bleed. You had to deal with that. So, I'm on a tangent. So, but if you put that tape up, you play the mix, you'd work on the mix, and then the next song you just scroll forward 12 seconds through the leader, and you'd hit play, and the desk was your template.
Yeah.
And the next song, and then suddenly you had a whole record that sounded like it was done in one place. It sounded like one piece of art. And with Pro Tools and mixing in Pro Tools, all that's gone. It's all thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Even if you have a template, it's still kind of thrown out of the window because people put plugins, they put levels all over the place. It's willy-nilly. So for me, this idea of getting balance, and sometimes that balance is just looking at meters. Like I put my meters, I use PPM meters on my desk. Unlike I don't use VUs, I use PPMs because my SSL has PPMs, and I will just put it so that most of the faders land around 0. That means sometimes there's tracks that are down -20. So then what I'll do is I'll go, okay, cool, that fader's -20. I'll put it back at 0 and I'll clip gain it down -20.
And that's a peak meter, reading the top peak, not the RMS.
It is
of the
not a
wave.
peak meter. That is
What's
not
it stand
true.
for?
PPM. It means
I thought it stood for peak.
it's not just peaks though.
But it is a transient meter. It's showing transients. It's not like an RMS
But it's
or
slow.
VU.
It's slow.
Is it the one that kind of looks like a weird, the dynamic of it is weird?
Well, basically what it is it's showing
Kind of looks like a flame.
It's showing an average level plus the peak with a slow response. It also is set so that when the meter's all the way up, it's clipping. So the meter, like the 0 is here, and then like up here is like plus 18. It's like it's way up here. It's just a different. It's
So
a different view. It's BBC. It's BBC.
Would what'd you call it?
PPM.
Would a PPM meter? Would your snare drum look the same as a peak meter in regards to the height that it hits?
Sorta and sorta not.
Okay.
It's a combination of a fast peak meter and a VU meter.
Okay.
It's the two together. But again, you can do it on Pro Tools and see. I just use them on my desk because my VU meters, to be honest with you, if I put it in VU, I don't see a lot of meters.
Right.
Because the meters are I just don't see a lot of meters. So I can put it in PPM, and once in PPM I can see it, I can sort of balance the track the way I want it to be.
What do you think about recording a band through one console versus all these different mic pre's? Do you prefer like a holistic approach like that?
Well, it's funny. I got in a heated argument with a friend of mine about this, who told me I was wrong, which is kind of stupid because, whatever. But you can have a, he was basically saying that recording on a console doesn't impart a sound on the record. And I was like, you're out of your fucking mind.
I think it's the exact opposite.
It's the exact opposite. Recording on a bunch of mic pre's doesn't impart a sound on the desk. If you want to put the console's fingerprint on the record, you record through a console. You want to make it sound like an API record, you record it on API. You want it to sound like a Neve, you record it on a Neve. All that phase shift, like in a Neve or an API, all those transformers, all that phase shift, all that shit is awesome. You're going to impart that. If you record on mic pre's straight into Pro Tools and then mix it back in Pro Tools, it doesn't sound like anything but those mic pre's. And that is a sound that's totally cool and it's totally awesome. But that's not a...
I've always thought it was strange. Tell me what you think of this. And I've been guilty of this in my younger days in New York, where you'd put like a 1073, a set of Neves on the kick and snare, and then you'd put these really fast transient pre's on everything else, right? And it's kind of like my thought was like, well, you know what? I'd rather get one sound for the drum kit, let's say, all the same pre's, so that you don't have these slow slew rates on your kick and snare, and then you have the snare real transient in your overheads and every other mic. I like the sound of like, okay, let's get the console, let's get a monolithic, holistic sound, and then maybe you put the lead vocal through another pre.
Here's an interesting thing. My console has no pre's.
Really?
My console's a film desk.
Oh, wow.
So it has no pre's.
What are you using for mic pre's?
So what I've done is now, so everything I said before still works, and I'll tell you why, even though I have a bunch of other mic pre's. I have some Undertone Audio mic pre's that are fantastic. Eric Valentine, UTAs,
amazing.
fucking amazing. I have a bunch of Jeff Steiger's Cappy pre's, a whole bunch of those. I have 6, and I will soon have 8 1073s, 1084s.
Original ones?
A pair of original ones, and then 4 BAEs, which are really good.
Great, yeah.
And then I have an original, I have a pair of mic pre's I bought from Richard Dodd that were out of the Air Oxford desk. They were the remote mic pre's that were out in the panels. And they're kind of a real weird deal. They sound great, though. They're really good. And then I have a really cool, I have a 1272 out of a console that was modded to be a mic pre. That's great. I have 4 channels of RCA BA11A. And then I have 2 of the BA11s, but in the PA version, basically the exact same circuit with different transformers. I have 4 channels of Ampex. I have an MX10 that I modded with direct outs and pads and phase flips. I have EF86 based RCA mic, mono mixer, 4-channel into 1 mono mixer with direct outs. I've got Flickingers, I've got Spectrasonics, I've got Burls, I've got AEAs. Just trying to think.
So when you record, do you have enough of one thing to do?
No. So, but what I do is I put everything into my console at line, and then I bus out of my desk. That's where I get the sound of the desk.
So you route to Pro Tools from the 32 buses.
From the 32 buses. And I normally never record more than, honestly, drum tracks, no more than 4. Now, when I say drum tracks, that are actually drums, but like overheads, 2 tracks. Even if I have 4 mics, it's always 2 tracks. I use 2 mics on the kick drum, it's always 1 track. 2 mics on the snare, always 1 track. I always have a pair of what I call drum effects tracks. One of them is this weird Ampex mic that I point over the kick drum at the kind of the side of the snare, and then I run that through some pedals. I just distort and echo the shit out of it. And it's just a sound, and I time it up when we're working on the band.
Have you done any videos online of you and your drum philosophy?
Yeah, Pure Mix. If you go on,
go to
Pure Mix. I did a start to finish on Pure Mix with the band Illiterate Light, and they're a 2-piece band, so drums are like one whole.
Now, is that like a paid site or is that on YouTube?
It is a paid site. Okay. It is not on YouTube, although there are some free stuff. But it's a subscription. There's tons of great engineers that are way better than me on there talking about how they make records. So it's well worth the subscription. I have no idea how much it is a year because I'm a mentor on it.
Yeah.
But a good friend of mine, Fabrice DuPont, Fab.
We'll put your username and password down in the description
Please
of
do.
this
That'd be
video.
great.
I love the video you made of Tyler.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler Bryant.
Yeah.
That was a really cool video.
Thanks, man.
I wanted to ask
I
you,
love Tyler.
what do
Yeah,
you
he's
think of
great.
the Cappy stuff?
It's fantastic. I have 2 Platinum 28s, 2 Platinum 26s, 2 VP 28s, and 6 26s.
So if you got their regular 312 or 512 mic pre,
And I have 512s too, but I modded them.
if you just bought a stock one and compared it to the API, what do you hear is the difference?
They're awfully close. They're a lot cheaper. And you got to build them.
Oh, you have to build them. Can't buy them built.
You can
But then
buy
they're not a lot cheaper.
well, you can buy the platinum ones, and the platinum ones are pretty special. Really nice meters, different transformers, cooler op amps.
We should get him on the podcast.
Jeff Steiger, he's here in town.
Yeah, right?
He's as far away from you as you could get in town, but because he's way out by Harpeth, the Narrows of the Harpeth.
Okay.
He's way out there.
Who did we?
he's
Moose
great.
came from Goodlettsville, which was really far. I was really
Goodlettsville's pretty far, but I think Steiger may be farther. Because, like I said, he's way out there by, like past Kingston Springs.
Oh, I know where you're talking.
Yeah, Harpeth Narrows. He's right up by
Well,
there.
dude, we just got started, and we're actually
Oh, I'm sure we're way over.
we're way over.
I will
but
talk.
it's a testament to
I
like,
will talk your ass off.
the amount of information in your head. So we'd love to have you come back on and
Sure.
continue talking about stuff. We had a blast having you. You have any? If people want to get in contact with you, the best place is your website.
Well, actually, here's the deal. There's 2 things. You can email me at vance@vancepowell.com. I tried to make it complicated. You can contact my management at GPS, Global Positioning Center, or Global Positioning System, GPS, Global Position, whatever it is. You can look them up online. My managers, Jeremiah Grauber and Colin Ramsey. Those, if you want to talk to me about doing business, call them first. Because if you email me, I will just send the email to them. I try my best to not talk any business with artists I'm working with. But if you have questions, you can email me, vance@vancepowell.com. If you want to know what I've done, look at my client list. GPS has a really nice page on there for me, and I think they're the ones doing my Wikipedia. Don't look at my website, and don't look at the
You're
Sputnik Sound website.
2 Grammys behind on your website.
Yeah, well,
You need to fire yourself.
It's a whole deal. To be honest with you, I don't even know how to edit it.
I
don't
just
even know how to
assumed,
do
like,
it.
I'm like, oh, the Wikipedia's got to be wrong, right? Because it's Vance's
No,
website.
It's right. It's right. Actually.
Well, I'm glad you corrected us. 6 Grammys, and I love that you just have a non-traditional sort of approach to making music. What I really loved about what you said in that Pure Mix thing was like, you just don't know. You might want your kick drum to sound one way one day or one way or the other. You'll go into the room and listen and say, hey, that's not in there. I don't want that. Or maybe you just don't have any preconceived notions, which I think for an engineer is pretty special.
Well, I think that's part of the production side of it.
Anything is possible.
Anything and everything's possible. And I've made a lot of bad decisions. So you think you learn from your bad decisions, but you don't realize they're a bad decision usually for about a year, and then you go, oh man,
You hear it on the radio.
I mean, I can't. Yeah, but I mean, or even just there's a radio station I listen to, is a really cool streaming station called KPJK, and you can find it on TuneIn, the TuneIn app. It's fucking awesome. And every once in a while, like a record I've done will pop up on there, and I'll be listening like, why did I do that like that? There's a lot of stuff I did with Jack White. I mean, we cut all that on 8-track, so like it's 1 track of drums.
You're mixing while you're recording.
Yeah, 1 track of drums, 1 track of bass, couple tracks of guitar usually, couple tracks of vocals, and then piano or shaker. Or,
No pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I did a Wanda Jackson record. We had a 14-piece band, 2 keyboard players, bass, and upright bass and tic-tac bass, steel guitar, acoustic guitar, Jack White electric guitar, horn section, and piano and organ, all in one room to 7 tracks.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, you have to kind of mix the record.
You're mixing the record.
And you're mixing to 7.5, which means that what you're recording isn't what plays back.
Right.
And there's no way to do it. So you just have to kind of like, I'm guessing here. And then later I go,
Well, I liked something else you said too, that is, like when you hear things a year later, like I know you said that instance there, but I think that time usually cures a lot of it. I'll hear records I did a year later, and you said the same thing. And it was like, that wasn't that bad. I actually really enjoyed that.
I have actually had that exact same thing listening to a record that I did that at the time, for whatever reason, there's a record I did. I'm not going to say who it was, but there's a record I did where my assistant, who's really my engineer, and I sort of, whatever, he's my editor. We did tens of thousands of edits because the drummer really just couldn't play. He talked a good game, but he really just couldn't play shit. And everything he tried to play it as complicated as possible. And we were supposed to track for 5 days. We tracked for 11 because he just couldn't get it. And finally, I just started saying, okay, fine, great, done. You're done. And then we had to edit.
That's interesting because you'd have to edit on like 2 tracks, one
well,
track,
no, well, I mean,
tracks?
this was a record we did in Pro Tools.
Okay.
But what ended up...
That would be interesting to have to like edit a one mic drum sound.
Oh, I've done it. Yeah, you have to edit drums on tape. It's easy.
I guess it's easy, but there will be...
No, it's not easy.
You kick and snare you line up, but like there's still going to be, if the hat's off, it's going to be off. You have to decide what you're going to put in time.
Well, the thing is, you just have to figure out what's important.
Yeah.
And the deal is that the big thing is, in that deal, what we did with Jack was none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was his performance or the artist's performance he was producing, right? That's all that mattered. It didn't matter that maybe the drums weren't perfectly in time. Right. I mean, every White Stripes record, none of that mattered. What it matters is the whole thing, homogeneously, or whatever that's the right word, the whole thing homogenized into this awesome product. And that's the important part. It's not whether it's in time, and it's not whether it's in tune, and it's not any of those things. The important part is, does this lyric sang this way do something to you? Do you love the way Seven Nation Army sounds? Okay, a lot of people do, because it was a huge hit, and it's in every football stadium ever. Did anybody listen to the drums and put them on a grid? Of course they didn't. Somebody probably did and made jokes about how bad Meg was. The reality is Meg wasn't bad. Meg was great, because what Meg did is Meg allowed Jack to do whatever he wanted. So Meg would play to him. He would play to her. They played to each other. Yeah. And that's why the White Stripes were so fucking awesome, because it was just all about the thing that happened at that moment. This thing happened at this moment. It wasn't about how great the drums were. It wasn't if every note was in tune, although I will say that Jack White fucking sings great. And he is probably the most talented musician I've ever been around. He can play everything. And if he doesn't know how to play it, he'll learn it in an hour. He's my... Ooh. That's not me.
Is that me? Oh, my son, even though I put my phone on silence, my son comes through.
I love that. It just happens, and then
Hold on.
Yeah, that's okay.
Hey, buddy.
Where are you?
I'm in the middle taping a podcast, and you're on it right now.
Oh, hey guys. What's up?
What's up, dog?
All right, let me call you back, buddy. And don't call me again, because you ring out loud. You're the only thing that will ring on my phone. I love you. Bye.
Yeah, he's by far the most talented musician I've ever been around. He's my favorite keyboard player. An organist. Oh my God, he's fantastic.
Dude,
we could go on and on.
We gotta have you back.
Well, side note, back to Neil Dorsman. He had worked with a lot of great musicians, Mark Knopfler and all that stuff, but he said that Jack White was the best guitar player he had ever worked with. His opinion was that he was up there with the Hendrixes of the world. He's that good.
Wow.
I'm going to categorically say he's correct. Yeah. I've recorded him so many times. There's a lot of things that a lot of people don't know. A, he has no idea what size strings he plays. He doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him if he plays with a pick or without a pick. It doesn't matter what size pick he plays. He doesn't care. None of that matters. He will plug into something and immediately sound like him. If he plugs into a twin, or we plug into a mic pre, we did that all the time with him. We'd just plug into the console DI, and I'd crank the 1073 wide open and turn the fader up like, half a dB, and it would be blazing on tape, just all distortion.
You put ramp farm?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just kidding.
I know. And it would sound like him. It doesn't matter what he plays through. It sounds like him. Yeah. All the good guitar players, Eddie Van Halen died yesterday to put this. Yeah. I saw Eddie play in 1985 at the NAMM show. At the NAMM show, he grabbed a Kramer off the Kramer booth. He plugged into this little Marshall combo, and immediately it was the Brown sound. Now, that's because this hand and whatever guitar he was playing was the sound. That's the deal with guitar players. Freddie King sounds like fucking Freddie King. B.B. King, all one note he plays all the time, sounds like B.B. King. It isn't their amp.
Lindsey Buckingham.
It isn't all that shit. The Edge is probably the first guitar player that his whole thing, everything changes with his effects. The deal is his effects are combining with his great rhythm, because you're playing with delays, man. You got to have rhythm. His thing is his thing, and Jack's that way too. Jack's a fantastic drummer. He plays drums kind of like a guitar player, which means that sometimes he plays things that make no sense, and that's what makes him so cool. He's a great bass player. I mean, this is maybe secret, but I don't think it is. Keith Richards asked Jack to play bass in the Rolling Stones. Of course, he asked him to play bass the day he was on the cover of Rolling Stone with Blunderbuss. So Jack was like, yeah, Keith, I'm a little busy right now. I'm kind of doing my own thing right now. Thanks. But, I probably shouldn't even tell that story. But
No.
but it's long since it's old news now. But, it's like, and there's a reason, because he's so fucking
Your
good.
position is so cool, because I feel like if you're a really cool musician making really cool music, you're at the very top of the list that people go to.
Oh, well, thanks.
That's true, though.
I don't think
that's true.
I don't think it's quite that way, but because
You're in the very, very, very elite
I don't know about
group in Nashville.
I don't know about that.
Well, I do.
Well, thanks.
Sure you are.
Well, thanks. But,
Come on.
all right. Well, I'll shut up now, but I'll come back because I live down the street.
Well, this is awesome, dude. Thank you so much. And
Joe.
really great talking to you. And it's really good to see the same business through someone else's eyes, the same things, and it really, really just kind of blew the top of my head off today. So thank you for that.
You got it.
All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. We're signing off from the West Barn.
See ya.